Okay, hello and welcome to another sculpting session here on Patreon. Today I'm going to be doing a little study building out the primary forms. So we're going to be building out the Loomis head, the egg of the rib cage, and a box for the pelvis. And the reason that I'm going to be doing this is that I keep seeing this in student work. And so if you're over on Proco.com for the Figure Sculpting Fundamentals course, I just recently did a critique video where I go over and look at people's projects for the Cheap Sculpture Challenge. And if you're not over there, it's free to set up an account. And so I really recommend going over there, setting up a free account, and following at least the free lessons that are available on the Proco 3D YouTube channel as well as on Proco.com. I recommend following it at Proco.com/sculpture because there you'll be able to upload photos of your assignments and you can get some community feedback from other people in the course. And so if you like sculpture and you're not over there, it's free to do that part of it. Obviously, there's premium content, premium videos, and premium things like additional demos, 3D models, stuff like that for the people that purchase the whole course. But there's a lot of great information even just from the free videos. So as I was looking at those assignments, I just kept seeing that people really struggle understanding the concept of the primary forms. And so I like to think of it as if you took a figure that was sculpted realistically, let's say it was actually a 3D scan of somebody, so it's very accurate, and it was made out of wax. And then you took that wax figurine and you dipped it in some hot wax that was hot enough to start melting the surface away, and you did that a couple times. Then what you would be left with is a thinner figure that the details have kind of melted away, and the primary forms. And so the primary forms, it would be kind of an emaciated, a skinny version of the figure, but all of the primary forms would be in place and all of the proportions would be right. And that's really what we're going for in the first half of a sculpture when we're sculpting. Because if we don't have those primary forms established and accurate, then as we start to add on the details like the muscles, like the bony features, all of those interesting details, wrinkles, things like that are secondary or tertiary forms or surface texture forms. If we add those on top of a foundation that isn't accurate, it didn't accurately capture those primary forms, then the whole sculpture is going to be off. And so that's why it's so important to really make sure that we're paying attention at the beginning stages to get these forms accurate. And I'm going to be building out these simplified versions of these forms just because they're what I like to call constructive abstraction. So it simplifies it into something that's easier for us to represent artistically, like an egg, like a box, like a simplified head. Those are easier than the actual features. And then we can build on top of those structures to have a more accurate details as we continue on. So to start off, well, let's just start off with head. So I have this little loop that I've made that's roughly 1 cranial unit in size. And so we're just going to start adding clay to that. Let me see. I'll try to just do it with the camera here so you can see, and so that I can talk a little bit more during this one. And I'd love to know the format you guys like. This one's a little bit different. The last one I had 2 camera angles. This one I'm just going to go back to 1 because it's a little bit easier during the editing process. But whatever you guys prefer and whatever helps you and you just think is a better version of the content, I want to help you guys as much as I can, and so please let me know. Okay, so to start off with, I'm kind of just thinking one-dimensionally, and so it's skinny from this side, and I'm just going for a rough head shape from the side view. That's really what I'm trying to focus on and get it roughly the right size for for this figure. And let's see. And then I know where the thick points are, and so I can establish those. So I know that back here, towards the back of the skull, is going to be the thickest point. So I can add some clay back here. On the other side, right there. Like that. And the Loomis head that I'm sculpting now, it's a little bit different from well, I'm going to call it the Bodum method. So the Loomis method of sculpting the head focuses more on planes. So there's the front plane of the face, the side planes, and then it's just kind of an abstracted head shape. Whereas the Bodum method, it focuses more on high points. And then, if you remember from the last lesson we sculpted the head with those high points protruding quite a bit so that you have some structure to build off of, and I like that method. So that's another option. If you're building out the primary forms, you can start with the Bodum method that we went over in the last video lesson, and that's also an option. In addition to this method of the Loomis head, that's a little bit more focuses a little bit more on the planes. Then let me see, and I'm just going to get a rough outline of where I think the jaw would be. And you know, for starting, that's about good. And so it doesn't take very long, but I'm used to it because I'm used to looking at the skull and the shape of the head, and so I can kind of make it up as I go, because I've done it so many times. I've sculpted so many heads on the figure, and so if you're struggling, just getting this basic shape, then take a skull. Let me grab one. Whoops. If you have a skull, just take it and look at it and try to ignore the details and just focus on the shape of it from one angle, then switch to another angle, focus on the shape of it, ignoring all the details, just the outside rough shape, and just try to kind of copy it. You can close one eye and hold it up just to make sure that you've gotten the right size, and then you can also take a measurement and measure the size of the head and make sure that the figure is about 7.5 to 8 heads tall here for the total head size, and that's using head units, so from here to here, as opposed to the cranial units, which is what we use to build the armature. And so if you understand the figure, you can use and both methods. You can use either method. Whatever works to get the job done. But that's about good for the head. And so that's what I want to see when you're sculpting the figure and you're just starting to lay out the head. This is what I'm looking for as the primary forms that you can then build the profile and all of the features on top of. Okay, now let's sculpt the rib cage. And just going to cover the wire armature with some clay to start off with, and I kind of like to bend the armature to get that bend of the spine in, just so that I have in mind that's what's happening with the spine. But I mean, you can build that out just with clay, like it could be straight and you build that curve out. But I like to add gesture to the armature so that I don't forget that gesture is what's happening under the surface as I'm adding clay. And so that's just what I like to do. And then for this, let's just build out kind of an egg shape from the center line. So it's thin this way and then thicker on this side. I'm just building out that egg shape that ends at the neck and then comes down and comes down about to right there. And I want to make sure that it's large enough. And so if it helps you, you can print out a photo of the skeleton or photos of skeletons, and then compare it. Look back and forth, or just have it on your phone just to make sure that roughly it's about the right size in comparison to the head. And if you do err on the side of it being too thin, remember this is something that you're going to add clay on top of if you were doing a full figure sculpture. And so if you're going to err on that side of it being too thin, but try to get the height of it accurate. And so it's okay if it's too thin from side to side, but it should be accurate how tall from top to bottom that rib cage is. And I'm just thinking of this plane. So let's see if we can see it this way. So this, I'm building out a clay from the center line, and then I'm building out a clay towards the back, because I know that the high point is more towards the back of the rib cage. So the widest point on a rib cage, it's not up here, it's towards the back. And so I'm keeping that in mind. And so as I'm building an egg, it's not exactly just an egg. I do have some of those high points in mind, just to help me make sure that it's accurate and more like a rib cage than an egg. But an egg gets us pretty far on its own if we just think of an egg shape. So I'm checking the symmetry. I want it to be, symmetrical from side to side. So I'm looking and constantly checking to make sure that it looks right from side to side. And adding, pieces of clay and then smoothing them out. Thinking about that silhouette from the side view, from the front view. And let's get in pretty close. So let me see. So there we go for now. We're just going to leave it about like this. And let me just make sure that it's about symmetrical. And that is fine for now. So you can see it's got that egg shape. That egg shape is in place. Oh, I see that there's... And you can look at it from above. I see that there's some mass missing on this side. So I want it to be symmetrical because, it should be a solid structure that we can accurately build the forms on top of. And if you look at it from above, you can close your eye, look at it from above, and just make sure that it's symmetrical from side to side. It'd also help, to draw some center lines. And so drawing some of the center line on the front and on the back will help inform and make sure that we get it accurate and symmetrical from side to side. But that's looking pretty good. A rough egg shape. So I just sculpted an egg. It's thinner up towards the top and wider towards the bottom. Now for the pelvis, we're just going to sculpt a boxy shape, kind of a rectangular box that that gives us an indication of things like the ACES points, those two bumps that you can feel if you feel on the front. I can't see it in the camera, but on the front of your pelvis, if you just feel that bump that's right here, you know, you can feel it on yourself, and that is an important landmark to when you're sculpting. And so this kind of box shape, the top corners of the box represent that bump. And the box comes up pretty close to the pelvis, or so the box of the pelvis comes up and it's pretty close to the egg of the rib cage. And in fact, when we twist or something, our ribs will actually tuck into that box of the pelvis. And so as you're sculpting, you know, if somebody has a super extreme twist, your rib cage, the pelvis will actually kind of be in and underneath that rib cage, and so that's how close they are. And so I used to make the mistake of making them too far apart. This would come down too far, but they're actually pretty close when people are just standing. And so you can see I've just started to lay out kind of a rectangular shape, and then I'm going to come on the other side and add some clay to the other side, make sure that it's nice and firmly attached to the armature. And I like to, I mean, you could think of an exact box shape, but I kind of like to flare it out so that it's kind of if you imagine a box that was made of, let's say that the edges were rigid, and then there's like a balloon material that was inflated slightly, so the box kind of balloons out a little bit, because it is more, well, in reality, it is more round than square. So square, it just helps. If you struggle with symmetry, it's easier to sculpt a symmetrical box, because then you can measure and check each of the parts. And so I like to do a more organic type box. But if you struggle with symmetry, then this might be a little bit advanced, and you might just go with a simple box so that you can very easily see that it's symmetrical, and that it's not like too wide at some parts, which is harder to see when you're working with rounded planes. It's harder to make sure that it's, you know, accurate and symmetrical all the way around. So that's something to think about, and just do whatever you are comfortable with. Then I'm looking here from the front view. And also I recommend, if you're doing this beforehand, let's say that you know you're going to be studying from a model and you just want to speed up the process, you can do this beforehand and have everything ready, especially if you know that the model, if you know the proportions of the model, and you can kind of get an accurate armature built. If it's a specific model, if you're going for exactly, you know, the same proportions as the model. If you're going for just using the model as a reference, but making just an average figure, then you can use the average size armature, and then just you know, build out the sculpture on top and use the model as a reference. So if you need, you can do all of this ahead of time and save yourself a lot of time with the model, and doing it in a neutral pose will help you get that symmetry, and then you can pose the armature to whatever pose the model is going to be in, or if you have photo references or whatever. And it's easier to check the symmetry when everything's upright like this. And I'm gonna curve that a little bit because the box of the pelvis is tilting forward slightly. It tilts more forward in women. It tends to tilt forward more and be more upright in men, but it does, even in men, it tilts forward a little bit. So I want to make sure that the rib cage is kind of going back this way, and then the pelvis is kind of angled forward. So the rib cage angled at about this angle, and then the pelvis a little bit at this angle, and the neck coming also at this angle. So there's kind of this zigzag through the figure that you always want to be looking for. Let's see. So here you can see those primary forms. Those primary forms that I've established here. I'm just going to take a second and I'm just going to clean them up a little bit. So I'm going to take the flat of the blade and clean up some of these forms and make it a little bit more, hopefully easier to see the plane changes and stuff. So you can see as I smooth that out, it looks a little bit nicer. And so this one, you know, we're getting close to finish with this one. And so you should be able to do this a little bit quicker. It's a little bit shorter of an assignment this week, but that means that you have no excuse not to try it. And you can keep going. You can you know, build this into or take some photo references, or you know, have a friend take a pose and then use this and sculpt from it. On Proco.com, there are, if you go to the $5 sculpture video, the cheap sculpture video that I did, there are some free photo references of a few of the poses that were used for that. And so if you need some poses for references, that one I think has 3 free poses, and it's from 360. So they were provided by posespace.com, which is a great resource even if you purchase the photos. I think it's like $5 or $6 per pose, but and so it's a little pricey, but he has a bunch of angles, and it's just a really, I really like the resource. So if you're doing a larger sculpture, you know, that's more serious, that you really want to be like a portfolio piece or something that's really impressive and that you can show and everything, then it's, you know, it might be worth $5 or $6 to get nice references that you can use to check your work and make sure that you're really accurate with how you do it. So here I'm just pressing the knife against it and flattening it out. So just the flat of the blade, flattening it out, making those plane changes a little bit clearer. So you guys can see this is what I'm thinking about as I do the figure. And I might be filling in some of these negative areas. You know, I might have the neck and the shoulders, and you know, maybe I don't leave this empty, maybe I fill that in. But I really want to make sure that the symmetry and the primary forms of these features are in place right from the beginning. And if they're accurate, it makes the rest of the sculpting process so much easier, because you have something that's reliable that you can rely on and say like, okay, I know where I'm going from here because I checked the symmetry and it's accurate. So here I'm just drawing in some guidelines. Maybe I'll do the same thing on the front. Let's get that. So just right there on the front view, and then maybe the pubic bone is going to be somewhere in there. And right here, those bony landmarks of the anterior superior iliac spine. I think that's what it is. ASIS, anterior superior iliac spine. And that's what these little bumps are that we talked about. Got the rib cage, kind of some lines for that. We can draw a center line from the head, and if we were doing the portrait, you know, we would build out clay from that center line to capture the likeness on a portrait. Whoops. And so I think that's about where we're going to leave it for today. So a little bit shorter of a video, but that means that there's no reason for you not to get some of your own materials and sculpt it. And this is something that I really felt that people could use right now. And so if you have any things that you'd like to see covered in the next lesson, yeah, just let me know. I'm getting ready for a show that's next week. So if you're in the Colorado area, it's going to be in Loveland, Colorado. It's called Sculpture in the Park, and that one's mostly my stonework. And so I'll be posting, some images of those stone sculptures that'll be for that show on my Instagram. And I'm really looking forward to that. And if you're in the area, I'd love to see you. So if you're near Colorado, Loveland, Colorado, then I hope to see you over there, Sculpture in the Park. And other than that, yeah, I've just been sculpting, and I encourage you to do the same thing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.